Hey, sports fans, Coach Nick here, and welcome to our live post-game show after the Warriors visited the Clippers in Los Angeles. And with me is Dave Dufour, Coach Dave, who has been on the show before and contributes to BBallBreakdown.com. So, Dave, let's check in with you for a second. See, how are you feeling over in your neck of the woods?
I'm doing great. I'm doing much better than the Clippers tonight. I feel very energetic, even though it's 11:15 here local time. More energy than the Clippers had for the entire game tonight. Yeah, feel good. How about you?
I feel even better, and unfortunately, I had my sound on for the YouTube channel, so we started hearing who's that rapper guy that says you should believe in yourself, and he's got the shaved head and the. You know who that is. Anyway, I'm now aging myself. That guy came on and started screaming. So anyway, here we are. It's live as always, and it's our first one of the season. So there's probably going to be a few kinks we have to kind of work out. That said, don't forget, if you want to ask us questions directly, use the hashtag BBallShow, and we will get to them live and give you a nice shout out. So, Dave, I thought we could start off by talking a little bit about the state of the Clippers because they had a terrific start to the season. I think if we study the actual schedule, I don't know if you have or not, but something tells me that the quality of opponent might have been a little bit suboptimal, and that we've seen certainly this game tonight as a barometer doesn't really indicate that they're on their way toward going very far in the playoffs.
Yeah, I was really high on them in the preseason. I thought they would be the 2 seed. And when they came out firing on all cylinders, the defense was fantastic. Their offense was okay. They were scoring 110, 112 a game. They were getting the job done. But then they went on that road trip. And it seems like everything just kind of fell apart starting then. And, this team has had issues with chemistry and cohesiveness. They start to snipe at each other when things go wrong. And on that road trip, when they lost, what did they lose?
3 in a row?
3 in a row. And then they beat the Cavaliers, and then they dropped the next game at home to the Pacers. So they got beat by the Pacers twice in 3 games. And that's not good. The Pacers are terrible. So I just refuse to believe that, unfortunately I was wrong. And I refuse to believe that the Clippers are a legitimate contender.
Well, for me, what was interesting was that even in the preseason watching them in the first few games, it just seemed a little bit like a funeral march to me. It felt like, they're kind of playing out the string. They all know this is the last shot for them because of the free agency coming up this year or in the summer. And I just didn't feel that joy that you like, for instance, what you see with the Warriors. And the Warriors, by the way, didn't necessarily have it either for the first 6 or 7 games, but I think it was more a factor of, Steph Curry and those guys just having to feel more comfortable with each other before they start doing their little pointing and their little dancing and all that stuff, which is kind of fun to watch now. But that was missing from the Clippers. I think it's always been missing from the Clippers. And that might be an issue here where, like you said, chemistry issues sort of rear their ugly heads and might hold them back. I mean, do you think that you have to be best friends and really be able to enjoy each other on the court to get to a certain level? Or can you sort of be, sniping at each other and sort of have that edge and still win?
Well, I think that you don't have to be best friends. I mean, Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen were not best friends, not off the court. You don't have to have this thing where, you're going out for beers every night and team dinners and all that. That's not mandatory for success in the NBA. We know that. But on the court, you do need a rapport. You need to be able to get along with guys. It doesn't take much. Like Chris Paul, for example. I mean, this is who we're talking about, right? Like, he's the guy that jumps on people's throats. So let's just call him out for it. If Chris Paul jumps on Blake Griffin 3 or 4 times, 3 or 4 possessions in a row, I mean, how long until Blake Griffin just checks out? I mean, he was never even in this game tonight. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if already we aren't seeing some of the things that, DeAndre Jordan didn't sign that Mavs offer sheet because, he loved playing with Chris Paul, that was an issue. So I just think, I don't know. I think that everybody needs to lighten up. And I think that when you're having fun, the basketball is better. I mean, the Golden State Warriors are the ultimate fun basketball team. They're laughing. The other night, Klay scores 60 and Steph Curry's running, down the freaking tunnel. I mean, this kind of stuff, that is what makes good chemistry on the court. Like, these guys cheer for each other. Whereas the Clippers, everyone has a sad look on their face. When Jamal Crawford hit that prayer 40-footer tonight, I mean, how many of those guys smiled?
Right. It was not. You're right, and I think that it's also. Well, listen, Chris Paul is the gold standard for point guards, and we've been documenting that for years. But I think we've all probably played with guys like that as well, who they do take care of their own business on the court and they do it right. But they're really frustrating to play with because of that. They're always sort of sniping and barking and yelling and dour. And, this is now this is year 5, I think, with the Clippers. And this is the kind of thing that might cause a problem. And the other issue I think I have is that the referee thing is a real problem. I don't think anybody on the Clippers wants to admit it, but they're coming in behind the 8 ball to start the game with the referees who already know about all the complaining. And I think the real problem here is that it starts from the top. It starts from the bench with Doc Rivers. And I think that is going to be a big problem for them as well in the playoffs.
Yeah, all teams complain. They all do. The Warriors do complain a little bit. I mean, they complain plenty, okay? The Clippers are not that much worse than everyone else. But the perception is that they are the worst at it. And perception matters. These referees, I mean, come on. Draymond Green gets fouled in the attempt of a layup, and they call a flagrant 1 on him because his foot flew up. I mean, your reputation really does matter. And these referees, they talk to each other. Obviously, the league communicates with them. This is a thing. And I don't know that the Clippers can drag themselves out of this as they're currently constructed. Chris Paul has been known as a referee sniper his whole career. Doc Rivers, same thing. And if you've got both of those guys, I mean, it's going to be hard for them to overcome their reputation with the referees. And it seems like it's just getting worse with the rest of the players. I saw JJ Redick making faces at the referee tonight. Mm-hmm. How would Coach K feel about that? Come on.
That's it's a problem, especially because, and then when we get back to talking about the mindset the Warriors have, Steph Curry, I think what makes him great is that he has to play as relaxed as possible, and in that sort of frame of mind where the game, he's gonna force his mind to make the game easy, and then the game becomes easy. And if you were to try and force him as a coach to rip through really hard and be really stiff and controlled on the offensive end, he's not going to make those shots. He's not going to make those passes. It's going to be a lot harder. However, you have to deal with, the turnovers and the occasional, because of that mindset, the occasional lack of focus. But I think the trade-off is there. And clearly what you see with the Clippers is sort of a real grind, and like they're just tense. They're just trying to do everything so hard, and ultimately against a team like the Warriors, like I don't see them winning. I mean, how many games would you see them winning in a 7-game series?
I think it'd be a sweep.
Oh, wow.
I think the Warriors have not only do they have their number on the basketball court, they're in their head. Even in the preseason, the Warriors just went and just destroyed them in a game that they definitely did not care about. I mean, it is – I've never seen this before. The Clippers, by all intents and purposes, are one of the top 5 teams in the NBA. They beat every other team. But the Warriors just destroy them. It's kind of like the late 80s Bulls versus the Pistons, only the Clippers are old. They're not this young team like the Bulls were. So I don't know. I think it'd be a sweep in a 7-game series. I actually don't even want to see that series. I don't know how much fun it would be.
Well, let's talk about matchups, because that's the other issue is that, certainly CP3 on Chris Paul, on Steph Curry would be a relatively good matchup, defensively for the Clippers. Although we did see, the physicality even tonight and the little stuff in between didn't seem to affect Steph at all, which is sort of like the Bulls Pistons thing that you referenced when he tries to do that. But I don't think JJ Redick has any hope of guarding Klay Thompson. I think he must be about 3 inches shorter than him at least. And certainly several pounds lighter. And then they don't have Mbah Mute, and we need to find out what happened, because I guess he must have been injured or something. But he's the only guy they had to throw out there against Durant, really. And that doesn't bode well, because that's going to you got 2 of their best 3 players are going to be able to get any shot they want.
Well, not even that. So let's say they start Mbah Mute, and on the defensive end, let's say he does okay on Durant. Well, on the other end, Durant doesn't have to guard him. And then you've got Durant being able to be a free safety. And with the new rim protector powers activated by Kevin Durant, that's a nightmare for the Clippers, as we saw tonight. Kevin Durant had more blocks tonight than DeAndre Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
Because, they're just not worried. The Warriors are not worried about this Clippers team at all. And that's a huge advantage from a mental standpoint. Like you were saying, Curry plays loose. I think he plays looser against the Clippers than he does any team. And he seems to make fewer mistakes. And then he had 7, 8 steals tonight. He is completely in their head. Those guys are just flustered. And I think Curry is the primary motivating factor to their frustration.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? Let's turn to some questions from the fans out there using hashtag BBallShow and get into that and see how people or what they're asking for. That said, where is? Oh, there we go. Oh, so Google Hangouts changed their interface a little bit, but I figured it out live on the thing on the fly. All right, so here we go. Hopefully, we can all see this and it's big enough. The first question we have here from tonight was. Here, our friend of the program, Alfredo Rodriguez, asks, should Chris Paul have gotten himself ejected the same way Doc did? Does he care about a title or his image? Alfredo likes to ask the existential questions on the Clippers, for sure. Because Doc didn't get ejected from this game, but we've seen in the past, when the game clearly is over, I'm thinking in the Memphis series, whatever that was, we've seen Chris Paul loses SHIT a little bit and kind of just get thrown out, just take himself out of the game. Another one of those things where that's a real problem if you get in that mindset and you're trying to compete against a good team, a team that might be better than you. Yeah,
I don't like players getting ejected like coaches. Like, I think a coach getting ejected can fire a team up because it's like, hey, my coach is out there and he's arguing for me and he's fighting for me. Well, let me go play hard for them. Whereas if your best player gets thrown out, now you're trying to do that without your best player. So I don't know. I think you want your best players to stay on the court. And I was actually surprised that Chris Paul, he grabbed that referee. That was out of character for him. He snipes a lot and he yells a lot, but he grabbed him. And it was early. It was like the third possession of the game. So I don't think Chris Paul should be out there looking for ejections to kind of motivate his team.
I agree. I agree, but I also think that technical foul just comes out of their reputation as much as anything else. So all of that they do ahead of time, it comes back to haunt them now. And I think the referee is funny because it looked like he actually sort of waited for and was hoping that maybe he didn't have to call, but then he realized, you know what, I got bumped. Like that has to be an immediate technical foul, and I'm going to get in trouble from the referee's office. Once they watch the replay, if I don't call it. So a little bit out of character as far as I suppose the contact with the referee, but certainly. And by the way, it looked like it was off of him. They didn't show a replay, so we don't know. But again, it was a dumb thing to get all worked up about. So
I think he wanted a foul call, and in the NBA, you're just not going to get that foul call, unless it's very obvious. When you're a loose ball and you're kind of fighting for it, you're not going to get that. And Chris Paul knows better.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to our next question here that we have, which is Lakers fan asks, is Ball overrated? And I don't know if he's talking about Lonzo Ball, perhaps. Is that what he's talking about?
He must. And here's what I'll say. I'm a big fan. I think Lonzo Ball's game translates to the NBA, but I think his jump shot does not. It's too slow, and the release is way too low.
Well, have you watched him recently?
No, I didn't watch the most recent game, but I saw that he only scored 3 points, right?
The Kentucky game, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I watched the game before that, and granted it was against Portland, which is not a top-tier team. But I will have to say that his jump shot looks better. The mechanics look better. Now, the thing with that, though, he's still shooting kind of across his face like this.
Exactly.
But he has such an extreme turn that I almost feel like he can replicate this motion. It's a weird sort of to the side thing, but he nailed 3 or 4 of them. And I'm looking at it, and he hopped on a couple with good rhythm, and it was not slow. So I think, I mean, to me, he's a Jason Kidd, and I think he has a jump shot. So I had thought before the season started, like, there's just no way he can't shoot that way in major D1 level. But you know what? I think I'm changing my tune. I think I need to hang on. You're giving me reason to pump the brakes a little bit, but I don't know. I think he might be able to do it.
Well, I think that, you know, what you find with what I've seen so far in college is he's actually, I mean, he's shooting like NBA threes, and guys just aren't really getting a hand up. In the NBA, he's just not going to be able to do that. Maybe as a point guard, he can, you know, because he'll be playing against guys that are, you know, shorter than he is. His size and his court vision are incredible. That guy, he affects the game. He reminds me so much, and I hate to say this because it's you know, Lonzo Ball, even though his shot is ugly, he can shoot. But it's like Rondo during the great run for the Celtics, where he just kind of affects the game in so many different ways. And he's got a natural rebounding talent. You know, he sees where the ball's going. So
for sure. Well, let's move on to our next question here, which is Sirocco asks, last year a jump shooting team won the finals. This year's ISO offense won the finals. Is that a bad precedent? So yeah, I guess he means 2 years ago the jump shooting team won, and then the past year ISO offense. I mean, I can't argue in favor of ISO offense ever. It was one of those really weird things because obviously they were on the brink of winning. You know, the Warriors up 3-1. You know, and they didn't play very well at all. Actually, there's a parallel to tonight's game and the finals in some way because they had a huge lead early in the game, even though their better players were playing so poorly or certainly shooting so poorly. Yeah. And same thing with the Warriors in the finals last year. I think Klay and Steph shot horribly, and they were up 3-1. So I think that the precedent is now getting more and more firmly established every game. I wonder what your thoughts are. The ISO jab step, hold the ball in 5 jab steps, and then throw up an ISO shot. Those are going away. I think those players are going away, and Absolutely. It's going to be like the last guy who didn't wear a helmet in the NHL.
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, you look and the ISO game with the modern NBA defense, it doesn't age well. Carmelo, like we're seeing that with Carmelo. I mean, part of that is Carmelo's in year 14 and he's not as athletic. But modern defense, okay, if you want to shoot that mid-range shot at 50% or 48%, which that's elite level, guys don't do that. Chris Bosh, Dirk Nowitzki, they do that. Everyone else is like 42. The teams will take it. They'll say, okay, that's fine. You can shoot it. I do. First, I have a bone to pick with the question. The Cavaliers were a jump shooting team. NBA teams now are almost exclusively they shoot a lot of jump shots. And the Warriors actually are one of the best finishing teams in the league. Steph Curry is finishing above 70% at the rim. So this is the Charles Barkley-ification of NBA fandom. They need to watch some stuff that's not just TNT post game, because this idea that the Cavs were an all ISO offense. Now, did they have a lot of ISO and did they succeed? Certainly. But they also have Kyrie Irving and LeBron James, 2 of the best ISO ball players in the league. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is like the Thunder with Durant and Westbrook last year. Of course they ran a lot of ISO. They have 2 of the best isolation players in the league. That's their best bet on maybe one possession. Right. So the idea is when that's not there, they need something else to go to. Well, the Cavs had that. The Thunder did not. But I've kind of gone off on a tangent. But just the idea that an ISO team did not win the title last year.
Right. You're right. And by the way, the funny thing about, because you look at Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving and then J.R. Smith, these are all guys who shoot jump shots, right? They spread the floor. And, and it's not necessarily always the most pretty ball. But that said, when the Cavaliers get to play the crappier defensive teams, it's beautiful basketball. There's no ISO at all. That ball is pinging around, wide open shots, Channing Frye. So, they still have that. It just looks like at this point with the Cavaliers, they're kind of bored. They're kind of they're waiting for the playoffs to start already, which is the state of the NBA. You can kind of get away with that in the Eastern Conference now, I suppose. And there's not going to be a lot of resistance.
They were flipping water bottles in the fourth quarter. I mean, it's a joke for them. But so 2 years ago when the Warriors won the title, LeBron took their team because they didn't have Kevin Love or Kyrie Irving. So he took their team and he did go ISO. But that was the smart play, to use himself as the fulcrum of the entire offense and slow things down.
Well, my argument would have been you do that offense and you're going to lose 8 out of 10 times no matter what. And why not get more ball movement and let LeBron's gravity work to allow the other players to sort of move instead of standing still? You saw those plays where he would ISO on the left elbow and they'd have a wall of players on the weak side just standing there. The passing it was hard to get a pass across there. It was hard to do anything but let him shoot, 40% from long two. So I would have argued that that wasn't the play. And I certainly think that, David Blatt was not on board with that. It was sort of, as we saw, kind of forced to do that. And then they add insult to injury. They end up firing him, and now they're running more of his offense than they ever did when he was coaching.
Yeah, well, I get what you're saying. And I think maybe if they had better shooters around him, then the play would have worked, right? Because then you wouldn't just be able to hang out in those passing lanes.
Okay.
It's 2 years ago, so who knows? But either way, an ISO team did not win the title last year.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on because our the box score is now available. We can kind of do some interactive stuff with that. So what I like to do here in our post-game show is go through quarter by quarter and look at what happened in the game, because certainly that's what everyone's here for, to check out. So let's isolate here on this. Now the question is, can we read this? Do I need to make it a little bit bigger? Dave, can you read this?
I can. I'm good. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Well, your eyesight, is probably a lot better than mine. But either way, we'll talk it through in case people can't see it. They're on their phones. But let's look at this. And so the cool thing about this is you can click on all periods and go to Q1, Q2, Q3. So let's start off in the first quarter and see what happens here when it loads. What do we have here? The first thing that jumps out at you is the Warriors shot 54%. However, if you look here, Durant was 0 for 3. Thompson was 1 for 2. So I'm forgetting that he actually did okay in the first quarter.
He's 1 of 6.
1 of 6. 1 of 6. I'm looking at the wrong thing. 2 of 6 and 1 of 6. Thank you, Dave. It's great to have you here. And this was a concerning thing, I think, right? Because they had their two of the top 3 players combined for 3 for 12, and yet the score after one was 37-19. And if I'm not mistaken, they don't have the sliders. They're supposed to put them back, but I don't think the Warriors scored for the first 2 or 3 minutes of the game.
Yeah, it took them a minute to get going, for sure. And then it was tight around 10, 11-10, something like that. Mm-hmm. And then, the Warriors happened. And look at the rebounding numbers. They were actually cleaning up the glass pretty well. They weren't allowing they gave up 6 offensive rebounds in the first quarter, but DeAndre Jordan is up there hunting for tip backs on every single shot. So they actually did a decent job. Zaza Pachulia it's funny. Draymond kind of gets after him when he blows an assignment, and he blew a couple, letting DeAndre Jordan just slip right behind him for the putback. After Draymond got into him a little bit, he seemed to kind of settle back into his defensive rotation and get to where he needed to be.
It's kind of funny because, the argument might start happening that JaVale McGee should start over Zaza. And
I said that this summer before they even signed him. I mean, he's perfect for them.
Yeah. And, the only question here is that JaVale, is going to have to earn that. It's going to take him half a season of showing what he's been doing recently with energy and sort of playing. Okay, he still makes some boneheaded plays. I mean, the kind of stuff like, what are you doing? But it won't hurt them as much because he's with the starters. And so I had seen in the preseason when I was watching Zaza, and the question I wanted to ask the Warriors coaching staff was, what percentage of Andrew Bogut are you hoping to get out of Zaza? Because if it's anything more than 40%, then you're hoping for probably too much. And maybe they don't need much more than 40-50% of what Bogut brought them. And Bogut only played, 20 minutes a game anyway. But he's just doesn't have the hands, doesn't have the vision, doesn't have the athletic ability. I think Bogut's much more athletic than Zaza. And so I don't know. You think he's just going to sort of – is that his position for the rest of the year no matter what?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's hard to tell because Kerr is a little bit stubborn about his rotations. I mean, Anderson Varejao was playing crunch time minutes in the playoffs, and Anderson Varejao is like 4 or 5 years removed from being an NBA rotation player. So it's hard to tell. But all right, so Zaza, let's say he's maybe a quarter of Bogut. He doesn't have the passing, definitely none of the rim protection that Bogut offered. But the other thing is the defensive IQ. Bogut quarterbacked the defense, and he was so good at it. And he took a lot of pressure off of Draymond. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I think Draymond, I tweeted out that he should be the MVP. I mean, that was hyperbole, but at the same time, he's by far the defensive player of the year because of the job he's doing. He's quarterbacking the defense, and his offense is actually still pretty good. I mean, he's averaging almost 8 assists a game. So I just think Zaza is, he is who he is. He had that good season in Milwaukee. Last year was not good, and he has been pretty mediocre this year. Meanwhile, JaVale McGee gives you at least a higher ceiling. He's athletic. That play tonight where he tipped the ball over Spates to himself twice and then caught it on the second one and put it back in. I mean, come on.
He dunked it back in. It wasn't that was crazy.
Yeah, there's like, 3 guys in the league that can do that?
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely. I mean, that was great. You're right. So we'll have to see if he can. You're right about the stubbornness of Steve Kerr, and then also, he just needs to earn it. JaVale's had enough of a history of, sort of not being there, not being reliable, that he's just going to have to prove it to them for X amount of games. But we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised. And by the way, it would be an awesome story if he in fact does, claim that spot. So. Let's hustle back through the box score and see if we can get through what's going on here. The Clippers in the first quarter, Blake Griffin was 3 for 8, and he had some just wonky, terrible footwork post-ups, and then where the turnovers? 5 turnovers in the first quarter alone. 3 of them, or at least 2 of them in the first quarter, were on jump. He got in the air and then just threw it away. Blake is just is an enigma. I don't know what his story is, but it's certainly not a good one so far. At least not in this game.
Yeah, Blake has been so good this year. The Clippers have this really terrible habit of leaving their feet and not knowing what they're going to do, not knowing if they're going to shoot or pass. They just kind of leave their feet and hope they're going to figure it out. And I wonder if tonight isn't more of a – and again, I don't want to sound hot takey here, but we saw a lot of Blake – where it looked like he was doing something that maybe 3 years ago he would have gotten away with because of how freakishly athletic he is. And it just isn't happening the same way now. I mean, he's 28, I think, and he's coming off that quad injury. And I wonder if we're starting to see maybe kind of the downhill of his athleticism. We've seen him shoot more threes this season, and maybe that's a part of it, and it should be a part of it. I don't necessarily think he needs to shoot 4 a game or anything, but I'd love to see him shooting more trailing threes. But the poor decision making tonight, it took them out of the game. You could put this loss on Blake Griffin in the first quarter between his mistakes, his turnovers on offense, and his poor defensive effort. You could put this loss on him, and I wouldn't argue too hard that you were wrong.
I agree. And I think that his defensive effort is poor, and he doesn't make any plays. And when you have only DeAndre Jordan, who can get out of position himself, like hunting for blocks or whatever, it'd be nice to have one more guy that will actually have the instinct to move and slide over and cover. And he really doesn't have that. There's guys that they'll do like a reverse, and he's on that side. And when you're doing a reverse, generally it's because you're floating, and that release is not that high. It's not over the rim. It would just take a little bit of a handout to contest that shot. He just sits there and watches. Very frustrating. We saw a lot of that tonight as well. The one thing I'm looking at, too, on his numbers is that he's shooting 48% from the field. And he's only taking 1 3 a game, and he's shooting 24%. So the way he shoots on the way down or like hanging in the air, he'll never be able to be a three-point shooter, in my opinion, doing that. So, but when you look at his when his 2-point percentage is also going down like that, that is very problematic. He's a career 53% from 2-point range shooter, and he's down to 498, like just about 50%. So that's a little, like 2.5 points lower. That's like a pretty significant drop, I'd imagine, for anybody who shoots as many twos as he does.
Well, I put that to now. Is that twos overall?
That's twos overall, 2-point percentage.
I would put that as he's shooting more away from the rim. because he's actually a pretty gifted finisher. So I would bet that if we looked at deeper into those numbers, it's because he's shooting more of those mid-range long twos. I actually have an idea for his three-point shot. I think he could go to like a Bill Laimbeer style, almost like a free throw from the three, especially from the short corner, because his free throw stroke is actually pretty nice. I don't think he needs to jump. I think he could just flex up on his toes, and he could probably hit 35%, which from him, that's what you need.
Well, that would be the rhythm that they would get rather than what he's doing hanging. And I recognize that. I don't like his free throw either, but we can save that for another breakdown as far as whether that, because it's a catapult sometimes. Well, let's look into the second quarter here and see what we have, because as you can see up here, the Warriors hung the 37 points in the first quarter, and that gave them that huge lead, even though a couple of their best players didn't shoot well. And then the Clippers actually did a little bit of a run and cut that lead and shaved 5 points off of it. There's some momentum going on here. So let's see what happened to the Clippers here. We got them sort of back in the right direction. Jamal Crawford came in, and I had Vine in several plays of him being awful on defense. But if you go 3 for 4 from three, that can mitigate some of the defensive issues, and that obviously gave him the 13 points and really helped. Not much else other than that. Chris Paul got in the act and did shoot well, and that was about it.
Yeah, a couple of those Jamal Crawford threes, of course, we talked about the one big, like 40-footer. But there was another one that was kind of a heave as well that he hit. The Clippers offense is so like late in the shot clock that they wind up with a lot of these possessions where they're just like, okay, I've got the ball and I've got to get a shot up. And so that's part of what we talked about, before we started this, like what is going on with their offense. This is one of those things with the Warriors, though. I think that quarter is more an indictment of the Warriors than it is something great to look at for the Clippers. The Warriors do this almost every game. They have a bad quarter, and then they'll have an explosive quarter. And so when you find them in close games, it's because the teams have been able to keep them from having that big explosion. Like the Rockets, like the Rockets were able to kind of hang with them for a while. So this is like, I think this is just typical Warriors game. Second quarter, they're such a good third quarter team. I think that they have a tendency to kind of go into halftime, they're just kind of flipping the ball around, especially when they were up 37-19. Like, this is the tricky part about Steve Kerr's job, is when you've got a 20-point lead after the first quarter, how do you keep these guys on top of the opponent?
It's a great question. Very hard to do, and they'll have to keep learning how to step on their throats and continue to do what they did to build a lead. But then again, remember, the Clippers aren't bad. They are a good team. They were bound to make a run and cut that lead. They're not 20 points worse than the Warriors, I don't think. So let's look at the third quarter now, because more stuff, interesting things here. As you can see on top, they outscored the Clippers by 3 to kind of get control of the game again. And then into the fourth quarter, again, they outscored them by 1. So it's sort of a wash in the second half. But it definitely felt like in the third quarter the game was over. Like, I kind of lost focus on the game, wasn't really paying attention much. Let's see here. In the as far as points goes, again, you can see they scored 29 points, but no one had more than 7. So we had 7 points. Draymond comes alive a little bit. So that's the thing. They're so deep. They get so much contribution. They could have a different high score for each quarter.
Yeah, and again, so something I've talked about recently is that Kevin Durant has yet to have a bad game, and we got the bad Kevin Durant game, and the Warriors were up 24 at one point in this game. Yeah. This is unprecedented in NBA history. It's just you've never had a team with this much firepower. It is ridiculous. Now, I'm not going to go so far as to say it's unfair, but it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it is. And let's look over here. Blake Griffin, another offer here, and then 2 more turnovers. And, if 2 turnovers already is a lot in a quarter, that would be, 8 for the game if you played a lot. Real problematic here. And then again, wasn't really getting any rebounds. It wasn't really there. And that was going to bring us up to another point, because JJ Redick hits a bucket, but might have been his only field goal, I think. He was pretty much silent, which also leads me to want to head over to our questions, because there's a couple of good questions here, one of which is about JJ Redick. So let me fly over there and show you this one, because I think let's go into that. Basically, here it is. Andy asks how the Warriors were able to completely shut down JJ. No other team seems to do it as well as them. So, Dave, I think there's 2 words to answer that question. What do you think?
Team defense, Klay Thompson, Andre Iguodala.
Klay Thompson, I think, right?
Klay Thompson was fantastic tonight. He's 6'7", and that matters. He's got long arms. That matters. His closeouts were incredible. And not only that, but when JJ would pump fake on the initial closeout, his second effort to get to that follow-up shot was incredible. Klay Thompson was just, his defense, I see a lot of people are like, well, he's not really a shutdown defender. Well, certainly he is against opposing 2 guards. He's one of the best 2-guard defenders in the league. He's fantastic.
Without question. He's locked down, whatever you want to call him, and whether or not he might not be completely engaged all the time, in the regular season anymore. But when he wants to do it, you are really going to struggle. It's going to be really hard to get that shot off. And he's just big. He's a legit 6'7". I've been near him, whereas Redick is listed at 6'4", but I stood next to JJ too, and I don't know about 6'4". So let's just pretend he's 6'3". Legit 6'7" guarding him, who's just as quick, or maybe not quicker and stronger. Yeah, it's just not a good recipe for him. And the other thing about when the advantage that the Clippers have is when JJ's running around all those screens and getting open. Well, guess what? The Warriors do the same thing, and they do it better, and so they're used to it. And so they're not going to get fooled. They're not going to lose their rotation on that and get lost and let JJ get free like that. It's a real problem. That's another reason why, again, like we said, it's just the matchups don't work in the Clippers' favors at all.
Yeah, well, the other thing about the Warriors is that they really do play team defense. Their communication's incredible. Again, this is another Draymond, compliment, but you see those guys calling switches early because they know they're so studied on these teams. They're calling the switch early. So Steph Curry was guarding Redick for a little while, and you could just see him. He was getting a little gassed, and so he just calls a switch when JJ Redick's like mid cut, and Andre Iguodala slides out and covers for him, and it's just seamless. And so it's great when you've got a bunch of guys that are all like, Curry's the short guy at 6'3". But when you've got everybody else who's like 6'7", and you've got KD who's 7 feet tall and can guard 1 through 5, it's just they're good. I'll just leave it at that. Why overcomplicate it? They're really good.
They're good. They're well prepared. They're well coached. It's a nice, perfect storm, just like Joe Lacob described it. Right there, light years ahead of everybody else. Let's ask. The question here is James asks, "What are your thoughts on Steph Curry not hitting a 3 again tonight?" I don't know, but I would say at least half of those were just beautiful, wide open, no problem. And he just missed them. It wasn't like he was forcing anything. And that happens. I suppose. I bet you he'll make 12 again next game. It wasn't anything that the Clippers did. I guess that's my point.
Yeah, he just he seemed to be kind of not trailing away, but I don't know how often he got his feet under him on those. He had the one steal, and then he got the ball in the corner and he just threw it up. And those are shots we're used to seeing Steph hit, but those are not necessarily great shots. If JJ Redick was throwing up shots like that, we would say, wow, why is he shooting like this? But since it's Steph, we're just used to seeing him hit these amazing shots. So I don't know. Like you said, the Clippers didn't stop him from hitting threes. He just didn't hit any. And I guess that's going to happen. It's weird that it happened twice in a few weeks, but I don't think there's any real story behind it. They looked much better than the last time they were in LA. I don't think anybody was hungover today.
Yeah, right, exactly. That might have been what they were counting on. So let's go to our next question here, which is Cliff asks, players in the 80s talk about how their game was a chess game, but when I watch classic games on YouTube, it's just ISO post-up. And you know what, Cliff? I have a romantic version of what the 80s games were like as well, but you're right. It's a lot of sort of 2-man game on the one side, and then like they maybe reverse it for the 3-man game on the other. Those Lakers Celtics games, which I grew up watching, when they weren't fast breaking, it's kind of hard to watch. There's not a lot of offense run. The defense kind of stunk as well. It wasn't just it was maybe they double team sometimes and they kind of rotate, but you're right. There's something about that really, the way we play now really makes it look problematic. I guess, would you agree with that, Dave?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you brought up fast breaks, and it was literally fast break basketball or ISO post-ups. That was it. And I mean, really, like, you rarely saw anything that resembled a play. It was just kind of – now I'm sure people are going to come out of the woodwork and say, well, that's man's game. Whatever. It's boring to watch. And, and I loved it back in the day, but I didn't know any better. Right. And now I know,
When I hear the term man's game, I kind of picture, smelly and no deodorant kind of stuff. So that's my man's game. Yeah. And you're right. And I hate to say it because, of course, that was a great time. But we had broken down the Lakers Bulls '91, and that Lakers team literally had all their offense was just taking turns, because remember, you had Vlade, Magic. This is in the post. Vlade, Magic, Worthy. Perkins. When Perkins did shoot some threes, but he would also post up. So they had 4 or 5 or 6 guys all just posting up every time down. It was crazy. Even the guy I'm forgetting, they had like a 7-man rotation. They had a guy off the bench who was like a bigger guard who would post up. It was really hard to watch. So there you go. James asked another question. Out of Klay, Steph, and KD, who do you think will lead the Warriors in scoring? I had said at the beginning of the year, I thought Klay was going to do it because it felt like he was going to get the most and easiest shots. Certainly, we saw that the other game. That was what I envisioned happening a lot more often. Who knew he was going to struggle as much as he has so far from the three-point line? But who do you think is going to lead the team in scoring?
I think at this point, a quarter of the way through the season, it's KD. But Steph is right behind him. And I think Steph is more likely to have like a Klay night, like we saw Klay have the other night. I think Steph is more likely to drop 60 on you on a given night than KD is. KD is going to be like your steady 20 to 30 point a game scorer. So I would say I think Steph is probably going to wind up as the leading scorer. KD has just been so efficient. I mean, his points per shot are ridiculous. He's up there with centers.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, like 20 shots a game. It's crazy.
Yeah, no one has ever shot 57% from the field and taken any threes, and he's taken 5 a game. So like I looked it up. The last time I think I saw was like Shaq did it, and he was not shooting threes. So I don't know. I think that KD could keep it up. I don't think it's completely unsustainable because you look at the kind of shots. Why would that change much? But I don't know. Klay has crept up. His three-point percentage is now getting close to 40, right? And if he can continue keeping them, and that's a big rise. It was from like 29 or 30, to begin the season. So I don't know. He starts to creep up a little bit. That might get him to like 24 a game. I guess you're right. It's still less than he just doesn't have enough shots to get to get up to those guys. But I don't know. I'm going to probably end up going with KD. With KD as well, and see if I don't know if Steph's going to catch him.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me. I mean, either way, they're scoring between the three of them. They're going to score 70 to 75 points a game.
Yeah, and you can't stop.
Yeah.
Chris Simply Hoops asks, do Clippers need another small forward? And that's a good question because, like you mentioned earlier, and like I had a vine of them. And by the way, Mbah a Moute did play, but it was weird because I was asking you during the game, is he hurt? Is he injured? Because I had forgotten he played at all. But literally, I think what the Doc's problem is that when they're on offense, when the Clippers have the ball, they literally just ignore him. And that now Chris Paul can't get in the lane. Blake Griffin's, is going to have to catapult the 20-footers from the top of the key. There's just nowhere they can, attack that way. So that's a real problem. Even though he was making corner threes, what are they going to do? I think they're kind of hamstrung. They can't really make any moves, can they?
Yeah, they don't have any cap space. So they're going to have to – basically they'll have to trade Jamal Crawford or JJ Redick. I mean, he will be a free agent in this summer. I mean, so this is the real story. Like we started out saying we were going to talk about the state of the Clippers, and we sort of did. But the real story there is that Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, and JJ Redick are all free agents this summer. And JJ Redick is going to get a big contract. Chris Paul and Blake Griffin are max players. It's going to be hard for them to keep this team together. I mean, I'm sure Ballmer doesn't mind paying the tax, but I mean, if this team comes up short again, as we expect them to, can you justify running it back? I just don't think so. I mean, I think – I don't know. I mean, Doc Rivers is a good coach. I think he's a good coach. I disagree with some people that we're friends with on that. And he does a great job of finding assistants that are fantastic, right? And that's a skill. He's a terrible GM. He's done a terrible job of putting this team together. I mean, the Austin Rivers contract, which somebody asked. Actually, my buddy Tyler asked, what is he good at? I couldn't tell you. His defense is okay. Jamal Crawford, the 3-year – I mean, come on. He's 36 years old, and he is, at best, a defensive liability. I mean, could you say he's one of the 10 worst defenders of any players that get minutes? I mean, so I just think that, of course they need a new 3. They've needed a 3-and-D wing for 5 years.
You know, the argument could be that Spates and Felton were good pickups and sort of competent things that looked in the beginning like that was going to put him over the edge. But, of course, Felton's now hurt, I believe, right? He wasn't – oh, no, was he have family reasons? I'm sorry. Felton was personal reasons. But, the Paul Pierce thing is an albatross now. And, the question is, because the coaching thing, Doc didn't do well in Orlando and lost his job. He really didn't do well in Boston, was probably going to lose his job until, Ray Allen and KG fell in his lap and they won. And he takes over with the Clippers. He's got Chris Paul. So I'm not sure I'm sold. Now, there are a lot of the offense that they run I really love. Now, I have to imagine a lot of that is the assistants and certainly, oh my goodness, a guy I'm friends with who's from Princeton, Armand Hill, it has a Princeton offense background. You see a lot of that, and so that could very well be his influence. Remember he had Thibodeau as a defensive architect, and that could still be the bones of what he's using now. So I don't know. And then you throw in the fact that he complains so much for the referees, and that's clearly permeated down into the players. So we'll have to kind of debate the Doc coaching thing. But don't you think he gets a little bit of a reprise for Spates and Felton this year? Yeah,
well, I mean, I think I love the Spates pickup. I think he's a guy that you can have out there next to Blake, and you can have him next to DJ. And Felton has looked good. Felton he was pretty decent last season.
Yeah, he's looked really good sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, but their biggest issue is they don't have a 3-and-D wing. I mean, and they've not had that guy forever. I just think, and they mortgage the future, trading away draft picks, and Doc doesn't want to develop young players. That's the truth, and that has really shot him in the foot. I mean, think about 5 years ago. If they would have drafted a young guy who's a wing, you don't think in 5 seasons you could turn this guy into the guy you want? I mean, do you not trust your player development staff? I guess not, right? So I just think he wasn't thinking long term. He was thinking when he took this job, okay, I'm going to get here. I got Chris Paul, I got Blake Griffin, I got DeAndre Jordan. 1, maybe 2 seasons, and we're going to be playing for titles just like I was in Boston. Yeah. And unfortunately, that didn't work out.
Right. And then, you have the hope that maybe Wes Johnson's going to develop because Wes Johnson looks like the guy that you can develop with 3-and-D. And just doesn't get it. And I don't know. I guess he's not going to. It's an interesting conundrum. And as a result, Jamal Crawford, is there a lot of value for him because he's a guy that's scoring, 12 a game, but he's shooting 40%. And that's really rough to bring in a high volume shooter off the bench who is going to take bad shots. And, for me as a coach, I'd look at him on the side of my eye and go, okay, you're going to take that. You better make more than 40% of those if you're going to do that. Otherwise, basically the results are going to be terrible, even though you're shooting threes a lot. The results-based possessions are going to be a problem when you're only going to hit 40% of those and score up 40% of those.
Yeah, it could be a mood killer too. I mean, you bring in your bench unit and this guy's jacking up so many shots and nobody else is getting touches. I mean, it's hard to come off the bench and score anyway. Mm-hmm. It's hard being a bench player on a basketball court. It just is. You warm up and then you sit down and you get cool. I mean, like we've talked about, how do you train a shooter off the bench? Take a shot, run a couple laps, sit down. take a shot, right? I mean, you know, it's hard to do. It is a skill, and you know, he's old. I mean, he's older than I am.
Right. And that anecdote is exactly what Chip England did with Steve Kerr when Steve Kerr was playing, was they'd shoot around for a few minutes and then they'd sit down and just talk for like 10 minutes. And then they get back up and shoot again. And that really helped him. You know, I think going to, you know, play with a guy named Michael Jordan also really helped for your shooting percentage as well. But and also the triangle offense when he got there, but after Michael retired, really helped him. So, you know, it's an interesting take on that. And you're right. I think this is the problem that the Clippers can't really solve with a trade, even though they would probably need to, because I can't see either if it's straight up like Jamal Crawford for like, could they trade Jamal Crawford for like Andre Robertson? Is that what they need? Like, that's the kind of guy they probably need, right?
No, Andre Robertson's not a good enough. I think Mbah Moute and Andre Robertson, the defensive gap is not so huge.
Okay.
They need a guy like Alan Crabb.
That's interesting.
Know? Yeah, like Alan Crabb would be an interesting piece for the Clippers, but they can't get him. He's making too much money. Mm-hmm. You know, this is why 3-and-D wings are getting paid right now, because there's not that many of them. Kent Bazemore would be another interesting guy. Thabo Sefolosha would be an interesting guy. I mean, the most interesting guy would have been Kevin Durant, but you know.
Right. Well, and by the way, you know, by speaking of developing players and yada yada, the guy who they had, who nobody could have foreseen doing what he's doing, is Nick Young. Because Nick Young is playing defense this year, and I fall off my chair every time I watch the Lakers because I cannot believe it. But man, he is doing it, and I mean, who knows if he's be reliable in a big game against the top players? But from what we've seen so far, geez, you know, Nick Young is playing defense. Lou Williams is playing some serious D as well. It's crazy what they're doing over there. I don't know what Luke Walton did in the water, but there's a good example of developing players or tapping into it or somehow creating an environment where they want to do it.
Well, how about Jonathan Simmons? I mean, you know, like that guy was in the D League. I mean, he paid money to try out in the D League. And I'm sorry, but at this point, you just have to say, well, the Clippers are just bad at finding these guys. And what are you going to do about it? Should Doc fire himself as GM? Probably. I mean, how many GMs get – I mean, outside of Washington, how many GMs get to keep their job when they're bad all the time? Not many.
That's true. I wonder, like, you know, what kind of pictures Ernie Grunfeld has of the owner, because he's been able to hold on for quite a long time.
Yeah. I mean, and he's a well-respected guy. So, like, and that's a part of it. But, yeah, I don't know. That's weird. But I don't know, because Doc's not – all right, as the GM and the coach, he's not going to fire the coach. And unless he realizes, man, I'm just not good at putting a team together. They're never going to get beyond what they are, which is a second-round loss.
Well, we shall see what that happens. But speaking of getting where we're going to get, I think we've gotten to the end of our show. Certainly a lively discussion and certainly great questions from the audience. I know that this is our first one of the year, so I suspect that the next one we do will have even more interaction with the audience as they get used to what we're doing. And we're going to try and do some simulcasts. Like, we'll do some Periscope at the same time and maybe Facebook Live. We'll figure out a system how to get it to happen over here with the technology. But Dave, thank you for joining us, Coach. Tell everybody real quick how they can find you on Twitter, because it's always a good follow for them as well.
At Coach Dave Dufour. The end is DU and then the number 4. And you can just find me in Coach Nick's mentions, because we're constantly talking about stuff on Twitter. I mean, it's, you know, Twitter has enhanced the NBA experience in a way that I don't think anyone could have ever imagined. It's amazing.
Absolutely. And then, you know, also speaking of which, you know, obviously we're over at BBallBreakdown on Twitter. It is a great conversation every day with a lot of different people. Dave being probably my highest volume of guy recently I've been interacting with. We have a podcast as well. We do terrific stuff with. We had a great one I launched today with Ryan Pannone, who worked with Coach David Thorpe and is now a big international coach. So definitely head over there and check out our podcast. Check out our YouTube channel with a lot of stuff that, you know, obviously you're here right now watching it, but we had some great stuff. We had a Lakers one today. I got a KD one coming up on his shooting. And plus, we'll have to get out into some other teams as well. Dave, who would you want me to do a breakdown on next if you had a choice?
I want to know why the Minnesota Timberwolves are so bad at defense right now.
How about the third quarter problem too, right? Isn't that an issue?
Yeah, and I have my theory on that, which I think I've shared with you, but we'll save it for the breakdown if you want, or I can share it now.
Well, I think let's share like half of it right now.
Okay, it's a Tibbs issue. It's a Tom Thibodeau issue.
Okay. Well, we'll dig into that. I have a podcast with Steve McPherson, when we talked about it as well. I'm going to drop probably tomorrow or Friday. So we'll have to mix it up and figure out what's going on. But I think that might be my next one because the KD shooting one. Everyone's they'll enjoy that whenever I release that one. So yeah. Great. Well, thanks for coming on the show with us, Dave. We'll do this again. I mean, we'll try and do this once a week. I guess that's the plan, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If it's up to me, we would do twice a week.
Okay. Well, let's start with once and see how we do. How my family does with that without me cooking dinner for them on these nights. But at any rate, well, thanks for coming on the show. Great stuff. And don't forget, sports fans, at BBall Breakdown, we're not a channel. We're a conversation. You in? Are you in, Coach?
Yes, I am.